Hello everyone, and welcome to this video where we are going to be taking this nasty old shipwreck and turning it into this beautifully restored 1960s style cabin cruiser that's luxurious yet also capable when it comes to fishing. Now, I'm not going to be showing every intricate step of the process, but rather the major milestones, and we're going to end the video off with testing how it functions and how it operates. So let's get going. Now, before I begin on the restoration process, some of you may recognize this old body that you see here, this shipwreck. If your guess is from the Oma Diving Academy, you would be absolutely correct. Inside the big testing tank or pool, you do have a shipwreck. And if we grab some diving gear, we could make our way over to the shipwreck, and you could see that, first of all, it's sunk, and it is in terrible condition. But there is kind of a open rear deck. You could see a cabin here and sort of living quarters in the lower area here. So that is the foundation. Now, I purely did build this ship for the Diving Academy, but even when I built it, my intention was always to make it into a functional boat. Which brings us here. This is the first original version of the boat you just saw that is sunken, cleaned up a little bit, obviously restored, just pure white, nothing fancy going on. But in this case, we actually do have a working engine. Now, the boat is super unstable in its current condition. You could see that it offers absolutely no resistance to all kind of rolling and pitching. But if we fire up the engine, we do get it to go. And I don't believe it's very fast. In fact, on this version, I don't even have a speedometer. But it does seem to be kind of chugging along quite nicely. I'd guess this is maybe 30 knots. And again, like I said, inside here right now, we have the lower cabin, some seating, a table, bed. We do have skylights kind of throughout the place and some seats. Now, originally, my plan was to make this boat into an actual 1950s or 60s style cabin cruiser, meaning it would be analog dials and gauges and nothing quite fancy in terms of what the boat would consist with. But that didn't last very long, because even though the first variant of this boat was built with the Diving Academy, and that was before I had the Regal built Reba and all the other Regal builts that are the modern versions. So originally wanted to make it old-fashioned, old style, and actually true to its era. But that didn't last long. I started throwing in the electronics and things from this boat into here, added a little bit of a seating area on the rear deck, including a hopper for catching fish. So that came with the fishing update. That's when I kind of got back into this. So it took over a year of this thing being a nasty destroyed hull into the point where I wanted to develop it into something a little more special and actually functional. Soon after that, I decided I didn't want to be using the Reba as my foundation, as my basis. Instead, I'd use the Uvala. Now, because both are cabin cruisers, even though that one is much more modern, almost like a little yacht, this one is old-fashioned, but I felt the technology should be more or less similar with each of them. So I decided to do that. So while the back area is similar, now we have an accessible engine. I took some of the design styles from the Uvala, and you could see right away now we have this much more modern approach to a cabin. This now would become sort of a resto mod, or rather like how you have the new Ford Bronco that is obviously retro styled. That is kind of where I saw this boat going. So even though this is a modern boat, this would be a modern boat in the shape or form of a 1950s or 60s style cabin cruiser. I wanted to go with a retro style and color and even name, so I went with coral, and obviously spelt wrong on purpose. and kind of a coral style color scheme. So we got the kind of literally coral color or pinkish color, and orange, and then the retro blue. Now, as I started to develop the interior, putting a little kitchenette and working on the interior spaces to make them a little more livable, I kind of decided that I'm going to actually make this into a crabbing vessel. And while it's not supposed to be a commercial crabbing vessel, I do know that there are fishermen in Alaska and stuff that go on their little dinghies pretty much and collect lobsters or crabs in crab pots pretty much using a rib. So I figured a cabin cruiser would be a much nicer platform than a rib, and especially the weight and size of one of these pots is almost too big for at least, a rib. A large rib you could definitely use, but you'd need a crane or some sort of system to drop it at least into the water. So I figured this was a good platform for that. But even before we get to the lobster pot, I finished the boat in terms of at least having a functional system and something that I could at least take out on a spin with before I start to develop the actual lobster pot system. You can see here we're getting 23 knots or so. I'll see if I can speed it up in the future. It does have electronic boost, so if you do hold W, you could get it up to like that 26. However, if you see here, it is draining the battery, so this is not to be used permanently, but rather to kind of give you extra power when you need it. Now, the size of the lobster pot, like I said, is sort of the guiding factor for the functionality of the rear deck, but I thought that with a small rat crane, just like you see here, this would be a system that you could operate. So as long as you don't end up doing what I just did here, which is mixing a compartment that is flooded with the physics flutter and mixing it with a part that requires movement. And that movement you'll find right here in the form of this track and this weight system. So that weight system actually will balance the boat, because you do have to realize that just this pot alone, first of all, the hopper 12 mass, not that much, but the pot 45, the winch as well 20. So we're having that like sticking off the side of the vessel. Now, I don't use XML modding unless absolutely required, and there are some sort of drawbacks to the base game that almost require the use of XML modding. So I do have this little solid rocket booster, which was XML modded to feature sort of an uplift or mass reduction. So without that, this project would pretty much be dead in the water. So I use the XML modding very sparsely, pretty much when there's absolutely no other solution to the problem. Yes, you could put a bunch of weights here, which I already did even, but end of the day, the second you swing this crane out, even having the little bit of weight that I have here, you'd have to like double it, triple it even, and it just would not be something to really work with. And even in the terms of real life, there are special cranes and special systems for boats that prevent this type of thing happening. So I thought that in this system, or in this use, we can get away with it. All in all, which brings us to the final version of the boat. As you can see here now, I have added nice little decals. I've got a coral here, got some styling on the vessel exterior, changed the colors up a little bit in here, and as many of you know, with these classic Chris Crafts, you gotta have the blinds or the curtains on the cabin that just kind of goes with the territory. So I thought that adding these in the form of wedge pieces really does look awesome and gives that lower cabin that much more of kind of a luxurious feel. You'll note that this crane itself has the controls here rather than mounting them somewhere here, which would be easier to use, but I do want to make it seem like the crane is an add-on to this vessel obviously the boat itself doesn't even require a crane. You could have a Regal built coral without this attachment. This is just something that, let's say, the fisherman put on, and now it is able to catch lobsters and crabs. I did fix the vessel so it's not going crazy and floating around. So here you have it sort of sitting quite still. Now there is even a ladder on the rear of the vessel on the side here, so you can climb up it and make your way into the vessel proper. The actual seating area here stayed the same. I removed the table because this is more important. Now you'll note the controls are here, so yes, they can kind of block you, and I know I'm gonna get people saying, oh, you know, put them somewhere else. I want it to be that you have to work for it. This vessel, like I said, someone added this crane, and now you can, you know, operate it and catch your lobsters. So you gotta rotate around it, find yourself in a position where you can drop it and kind of just use it. So there you have it. It does go slow. I didn't utilize the new update for this because end of the day, it's a winch that can only go a maximum of 40 meters. So if you have to go slow, you go slow. That's just kind of the way the system is. Now inside, we've done a lot of stuff to the place. First of all, I'm going to hit the lights. So not only do we have the kitchenette kind of modernized and finished, got the hardwood floor, of course, a little seat here. Now there is the active stabilization. You can disable it here, and I'll show you how that all works. But in essence, now you have a working vessel that you can start up. You have all these lights, including a nice rear deck light, front lights, of course, and side spotlights. Now, one thing that you'll notice, first of all, when we go down here, the curtains are all up. You could sit, you can access the equipment. Love that they made it so you could open doors while you're sitting, just makes it so much better. But you have to think, because of the offset of this crane and because of the offset of the fish storage, how will the ship behave when you start to fill up that fish storage? We know that the weight will physically increase and cause the ship to want to kind of settle to one side. So what do? Well, first of all, there's how you put this lobster pot in, and I'll just give the goose the throttle and take it just for a little spin. Now you could set down that lobster pot so it's not kind of smashing around, but even in a bit of, you know, not ideal conditions, this boat still finds a pretty decent way around. Now we do have a fish finder up here as well. If you want to fish, you can find the seafloor depth. Of course, you are limited by a 40-meter winch, and you do lose 2 meters right here. So say you can only search for these lobsters when the seafloor depth is less than 35 meters or so. So we have kind of this. I do love the cycling cabin lights, so you can make kind of a nice mood or atmosphere. But pretty much now, with the way we have it, we could swing this out, drop it down, and start to catch lobsters. Now I will lower this and then go to sleep and see if we get some catch. So the seafloor depth here is 24 meters, and we got to go down just a little bit more. I will change the button to be toggle rather than push. These top ones will be push, but the actual winch lowering down would make much more sense to be on a toggle system. The lobster pot is sitting on the seafloor, and all the way up here you'll find the crane is just kind of sitting there, all good. Now we can make our way into the bed and try to catch some sleep. So now it is sunset, and we can raise up the winch and see what we caught. But you will notice the boat is staying relatively stable even with the extra weight and the kind of off-centered lobster pot here. So let's see what we got here. Nice. Now I do recommend just unloading these manually into here rather than bringing, well, you have to do it manually, but you don't have to move this in. You can just catch them all just like this, put them into your storages, and then lower this again. But you can see we got a good amount, so even though it is a small boat, it still is, you know, quite capable in catching smaller amounts, kind of like a recreational style crab boat. But you can see here we got 15 or 16 crabs and lobsters in there, and even still the boat is sitting pretty centered here with all that offset weight. Another quick test, actually in the workshop, what I always do to test it is load this up with coal. Doesn't matter, just to see how on earth will it behave. So you have it fully loaded in those hoppers, and yet the weight distribution is working good, and our center of gravity is still pretty centered, so you're not seeing the thing tilting. Now granted, I did allow it to tilt just a little bit, which I can't even really see here because of the active stabilization, but you know, if you fill up your hopper, you're going to have some downsides to it until you go and offload it, but it seems to be working quite well actually. So there you have it. I did add the toggle button to the crane, and I added the winch to go just a little bit faster, just so you're not waiting for it forever to come. But there you have it, the new Regal built Coral. It's supposed to be 1960s style retro or retro modded vessel that actually serves as a recreational lobster or crab fishing boat. So I can't wait to release this for everyone to use it and kind of enjoy it. I think it's a lot of fun just taking this thing out, and it's not very fast. It's got a, I believe, like 8-cylinder engine or something. You definitely don't want to flood that, but it's not a super fast vessel, but it is kind of a fun vessel, and you can test it out when it comes out and let me know what you think. But until then, I can't wait to see you in other videos, and I do have a lot of other content coming. I have a lot of other creations coming, so stay tuned for all those. Thank you for watching, and as always, happy Stormworksing everyone. See you next time.